still joining, but I think we'll go ahead and get started just for the sake of time. So welcome everybody to our May resource sharing meeting. I'm Allison Schwedner. I'm the director of the Community Collaborative, which is a program of the Tahoe Truckee Community Foundation. And for those of you that are new to our collaborative, we are comprised of 45 health, education, and social service organizations, about 6 coalitions who collectively work to address the fundamental needs of residents in the Tahoe Truckee area. And I'm particularly excited about this meeting today. Every May, we host a resource sharing meeting in partnership with the Suicide Prevention Coalition to honor Mental Health Awareness Month. And I'm thrilled that Dr. Vail is here to talk with us today about managing compassion fatigue and provider burnout and COVID for the long haul. It's a topic I'm particularly needing today, as my colleagues can attest to. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Shannon Decker. So Shannon, thank you so much for your work organizing the meeting today. And Shannon works for Sierra Community House and is the coordinator for the Suicide Prevention Coalition. So I'll turn it over to you, Shannon, and thank you again.
All right, thank you, Allison. Hi, everyone. I'm Shannon Decker, Suicide Prevention Coordinator for the Truckee Tahoe Suicide Prevention Coalition. May is Mental Health Matters Month, and there are a lot of awareness and other activities that are taking place. This year, our theme is Hope for Change. And so the activities and the messages that are going out this year are really trying to help empower us to face the changes of the future and to help let hope guide us. And it reminds us to speak and rely on hope, that this is a big principle, as the year of 2020, 2021 has been a year of change. And we'll speak more on that.
Just a reminder, folks, we go ahead and mute themselves. That would be great. Thank you.
We'll speak more on that later, but it's a great theme that ties in with what Dr. Vail is here to present with us. Dr. Vail is a licensed clinical psychologist. She's been in private practice in North Tahoe since 2006. Her approach in therapy is really based on the wellness model that supports the underlying healthy self, working to unravel any faulty beliefs or behaviors that prevent adults, adolescents, and children from living their best lives. She's going to share with us a bit on overcoming COVID fatigue, and there's really so much that we can cover on this topic. So I'm hoping that we can hit the tip of the iceberg and to dive into some deeper, meaningful connections to what we've all been going through, both personally and professionally over the last year. So with no further ado, I'm going to hand things over to Dr. Vail. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today and for being here and being interested in this topic. And most of us are in the helping professions, and it's really easy to overcommit when there is such a huge need. And I'm hopeful that this presentation today will give all of you some skills and a different way of looking at self-care from a perspective of radical self-care. So I'm going to share my screen right now. Can you guys see it? Is it showing?
Not yet, Dr. Vail.
Okay, so then here we go. We practiced this earlier, so I would be ready. Okay, here we go. Is it showing?
Looks good.
All right, so I'm going to now slideshow, play from the start. Okay, so May, Mental Health Awareness Month. Really, every month is Mental Health Awareness Month in my world as a psychologist, but I'm grateful to be able to participate and be here with all of you in honor of Mental Health Awareness Month of May, and talking about something that I do believe is incredibly important, especially given all the things we've seen with COVID. And these topics apply to really any situation, but in the face of COVID, what we're all dealing with, I'm hopeful that this will to provide some information to show how we're really all in this. This is not a sprint. This really is an endurance race. And we're really just gearing up for the mental health needs that are coming our way. And the needs of the nonprofit sector, the needs of the community sector, and kind of the government sector to see what people need. I'm hopeful that this will provide some information kind of as a launching board to help organizations recognize what their employees are going to need and all their staff, and also from the perspective of individual clinicians and individuals who are on the front lines, how to basically take care of yourselves so you can go the long distance. The title is COVID for the long haul, managing compassion fatigue, and provider burnout, which are topics that many people are familiar with, but I'm going to break them down and give a few different definitions and ways to think about compassion fatigue. It's something that when I was in graduate school, they did talk quite a bit about how important it was to avoid compassion fatigue, how to take care of yourself, things that most of us already know. But what they didn't ever tell us was how to recognize that you were experiencing compassion fatigue. And that is what I'm hoping to share with everyone today. And this right here is one of the most important concepts of this whole presentation. Never give from the depths of your well, but from your overflow. Because if you pour all that you have into the people that you care for, you won't have anything left. And if you don't have anything left, you won't be able to help. And helpers who don't have anything left to help often find themselves in great crisis because they don't recognize themselves for who they are when they're completely depleted. And it can cause an awful lot of personal crisis and unnecessary stress for providers and anyone in the helping profession. So I'm going to give a few definitions to make sure that everyone is using the language with in the same context that I'm using. Basically, sympathy is the concept of you don't ever have had to have something happen to you to be able to recognize that doesn't look like a good situation. One of the metaphors that I think about is of driving on the freeway, and you don't have to have ever had a mattress fly off of your car to be able to recognize when someone's mattress is on the side of the freeway. Oof, that looks like they are in a bad situation. But if you ever have had a mattress fly off your car, you're going to have an empathetic reaction. And most people who are helpers or who identify in any type of a healing profession, and I'm going to go out on a limb here and guess that everybody who is here on this call today is an empathetic person because they're working to help other people, whether directly or whether through community outreach. But the concept of empathy it's really a visceral reaction. And if you have ever had a mattress fly off of your car and you see somebody's mattress fly off the car, you might have a wave of like, oh, I remember what that was like. And there is an emotional connection with the other person. It doesn't have to be the exact situation. You can have had a couch fly off of your car, and it's a similar enough situation that you'll be able to recognize that feeling. And then there is compassion, which many people are not really clear on the exact definitions of it. But compassion, as I see it, is the recognition of suffering coupled with the desire to do something to alleviate suffering. And it really means suffering together, which if people aren't sympathetic or don't have sympathy or empathy, they're not going to be compassionate. It's really a hallmark requirement for compassionate people. One of the problems with being a person in the helping profession is these are typical occupational hazards. They're not the kind of occupational hazards that OSHA recognizes, but they are still occupational hazards nonetheless. And they're things that don't necessarily mean that you have to be really too worried about things, but they're just things to be aware of and be mindful if they start to build up. And I'm not going to read all of them, but most people who help others experience things when they connect with other people. And this is just a list of some of those things. The next, and one of the biggest problems for helpers is that if they don't take care of themselves, they can end up experiencing compassion fatigue, which is a really unpleasant experience and is one of the biggest challenges for healers and for helpers of others. When when compassion fatigue enters the picture, therapists and I'm just going to say healers, because everyone I think in some way is a healer here, is they don't recognize themselves because they know themselves to be compassionate people. And all of a sudden they have this lack of compassion for other people. This term, it's a buzzword term, but it's really a preoccupation with absorbing trauma and the emotional stresses of others, which in turn creates a secondary traumatic stress in the helper. And it's been described as a convergence of secondary traumatic stress, which is similar in some ways to post-traumatic stress disorder, and the cumulative burnout concept, which is physical and mental exhaustion caused by a depleted ability to cope with one's environment. So as important as it is to recognize what compassion fatigue is, many healers don't know how to identify if they are actually experiencing it, which is really important, because when people are experiencing compassion fatigue, they basically don't feel connected to the work, and they don't feel connected to the people that they're working with and trying to help. So one of the best ways of identifying if you have compassion fatigue is to ask yourself, do you care or do you not care anymore about what you're doing? Do you find yourself tuned out? Do you find yourself not paying attention to people and talking about what they're experiencing? Because that is really one of the biggest hallmarks of that. And I have an acronym I'll show you in a minute, which helps me remember how to pay attention to that concept of compassion fatigue. Now, in the big picture, many organizations and agencies are faced also with organizational trauma when the collective experience that everyone is dealing with overwhelms the organization's defensive and protective structures and tends to leave the entity vulnerable and sometimes even permanently damaged. And in the last year with COVID, a lot of companies have ended up furloughing employees. The ones that are left are working 5 times harder than they were before, and the needs are increasing, and they are feeling they're just tired and worn down. Now, this is more of an organizational concept. I'm not going to talk too much about that, but it is a really important concept for paying attention to the big picture as an agency. A good metaphor, and I like this one because we live in an area where it snows a lot, we get a lot of snow, is that the agency's responsibility and the company's responsibility is an awful lot like our county's snow removal requirements. The county is responsible for removing the snow from the streets and the roads so people can travel, but it's the individual's responsibility to plow your own driveway and to clear your own road so you can get out. So from an organizational perspective, there are all kinds of conversations to be had about that. And if anyone's interested in that, I'm happy to help discuss some of that later. But the main focus of this is going to be on the individual and the importance of clearing your own snow, plowing your own driveway so you can get out and move about your life. A burnout is something that is an occupational hazard in every job. It's really just a state of emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion that is due to prolonged stress. And any company, any employee, any job can have burnout. Parents especially are experiencing a lot of burnout right now because they're home they have been home trying to help their kids be in online school, which has been an entirely different mess for many of them. But there are so many different things that people are experiencing right now from the helping profession, and the levels of needs, the high level of needs in the community are creating, for a lot of helpers, a concept of what's called vicarious traumatization, which is really an internal experience where people are exposed to a lot of information that is often very negative and can create feelings of guilt in the helper, and it can disrupt their feelings of hope and possibility because the level of overwhelm is so big. One of the bigger challenges with helpers in particular is that they're often acutely aware of their sense of privilege and how they are in the helping position, and that can create increasing feelings of conflict and guilt, which lead sometimes to overworking in an attempt to mitigate the guilt. They're kind of overdue for others to make amends for what they have and the position of privilege that they have in their life. And that's an important concept to be aware of to prevent burnout and to prevent compassion fatigue, and to be mindful of when people feel that they're stepping outside of their normal boundaries and doing things that they wouldn't necessarily have done before, because that's one of the hallmarks of giving yourself awareness that you're leaning towards getting yourself into trouble by over-serving. So secondary traumatic stress is another big concept with being exposed to trauma. And it's often, this can be linked in a lot of ways to post-traumatic stress disorder. It's got a lot of similarities to it, where the helper is really overwhelmed with hearing about the traumatic experiences that other people are having. And in the needs of the community right now, there are so many people who have such high needs. And the fact that so many people have been impacted by COVID and have lost family and friends and jobs and resources, and they're isolated and lonely, the level of secondary traumatic stress to the helpers is really high. And it often leads to a desire to keep trying to help, because it mitigates the anxiety. If you keep doing things to help other people, it can decrease the level of stress and feeling of helplessness and of how overwhelmed people are, which all can lead to burnout, of feeling overwhelmed, and compassion fatigue. So some of the challenges with these three things and recognizing them is that at different times in people's lives, they experience all of these things: insomnia, low libido, overeating, sometimes skipping meals, feeling isolated, depressed, anxious, feeling angry, irritable, unmotivated. These are all signs that basically are, they're hallmarks of, they're warning signs. And it can also, when people feel overwhelmed, they can also sometimes oversleep, they can feel exhausted, there can be a lot of stress at home, they can be overindulging in alcohol or different types of addictive behaviors, video games. There can be a lot of lack of self-care. And for people who are in the helping profession, some of the hardest ones and some of the, as I mentioned before, the hallmarks of compassion fatigue come to the concept of apathy and of feeling the lack of hope, that things are just so overwhelming, they don't know where to go. So if anyone is experiencing the concept of apathy, especially, I mean, all the other things, some of the people forget to get busy, they forget to eat. Sometimes people don't sleep. There can be lots of different reasons for anxiety, for being irritable or feeling unmotivated. But when all of these things combine, or you have several of them you check off, it's important to slow down and self-check and see what is what's pressing on you and leaning you into this direction, because it's a lot easier to catch before you fall off the cliff. If you can steady yourself before you slip, it's a lot easier to recover your footing. But many helpers just keep going because the needs of the community are so great that they end up really low and can end up feeling totally depressed, which I have an acronym. I often think that depression it's basically broken into two words. It's a sign for deep rest. And when people are depressed, that tends to be what they need, is to really sleep and rest. And our society doesn't really give many people the opportunity, or we tend to not give ourselves the opportunity to really rest and relax and to nourish ourselves, because there's so much to do. And people tend to really pride themselves on being busy. It's like a sign of like, yeah, I'm a really busy person. I did all these things today. And many of them don't even have to be done, but people wear that busyness as a badge of honor. And sometimes it's good. I like to be busy sometimes too, but I prefer to think in terms of my life being full or my days being full instead of myself being busy. Tends to feel better. And then I have to self-check and ask myself, well, what did I really fill my day up with? Is it just meaning like little tasks that are just to keep busy, so I'm avoiding thinking about something or doing something? Or am I actually enjoying myself and my day and taking note of the things that are filling up my day? And if there's a balance between work and fun and play and exercise and all of those things. So that's another good way to self-check, to see how busy are your days and what exactly are you doing with your time. Okay, so next slide. So one of the hallmarks of compassion fatigue is something that I refer to as DGAD syndrome. There are all kinds of other acronyms you could use, but given this platform, I'm going to keep it PG, which is DGAD, which translates to don't give a damn syndrome. And that really is the hallmark of compassion fatigue. When people find themselves not caring, or they really just feel flat, or don't feel like they have an emotional connection to what they're doing, that is a hallmark syndrome of compassion fatigue. And it can be incredibly painful for helpers because they don't recognize themselves. It can lead to the feeling of identity crisis, of midlife crisis. How come I'm not caring about what I once cared so much about? And leads to that concept of apathy, and often to feeling really depleted and withdrawing from the things that previously brought them a lot of fun and pleasure and emotional satisfaction. And many people in the helping profession really do it because they're heart-centered people and they enjoy the work. And when they find themselves not feeling emotionally invested or like flat about the work, what they're doing, the people that they're taking care of, it can be incredibly distressing and often leads to more withdrawing behaviors. It can lead to substance use. It can lead to just basically neglect of self and relationships, which when people are in compassion fatigue mode, relationships are really one of the most important concepts and things to focus on sustaining, but it's often the last thing that people with compassion fatigue want to do, which is engage with other people. So it's really it's a loop and a trap. So this is one of my favorite quotes. It's been used quite a bit recently in the media, especially in regards to some of the legal things that have happened, and the concept of indifference, which when people aren't feeling love and compassion for others, recognition of suffering, they feel numb. And that concept of indifference, of not really caring, is a really dangerous place to be for people who are helpers. And this concept may help you recognize where you're at on that line from the place of don't give a damn syndrome. Because if you're not caring and you're feeling indifferent, you're not giving a damn about what you're doing or others, or if you find yourself when you're sitting with people really tuned out or thinking about other things, it's really good information to self-check on what's really going on with you. Now, as a psychologist, I was trained in what's referred to as countertransference, which is using my reactions, my emotional space in relation to the people that I'm working with to give me information about what's going on with them. But that's a different concept from as a psychologist. But this piece with helping people recognize what indifference looks like will likely be helpful in keeping you from sliding off the hill. Now, most of us know that, mind, body, and spirit, that's the holistic triad, that taking care of yourself is going to help you feel better. It's going to lead towards, healthier thoughts, healthier body, healthier relationships. Most of us know these things. This is not the rocket science part, actually. We know that balanced, nutritious diets are important, that regular exercise is important, that routine schedules of restful sleep and that having a balance between work and life is important. We know that honoring emotional needs and relationships is important. We know it's important to have a spiritual connection with ourselves. But it's so easy to fall off the path and end up not doing these things. So this is this one right here is funny. Most people freak out when their phone starts to run out of batteries, and they will do anything to get a charger because they don't want to miss out on whatever they're going to have happen if their phone runs out of batteries. Most people don't think the same way about themselves. So I'm going to encourage you to think about yourself and refilling your battery the same way you do with your cell phones, and not let yourself run out of battery. Because when you run out, you're of no use to anybody else, especially to yourself. And this is the concept that is when people say, when you get on an airplane, they say, in case of emergency, put the oxygen mask on yourself first before you take care of anybody else. But helpers tend to do the opposite. They tend to help everybody else and martyr themselves, and then be upset and feel worn out because they're not appreciated or other people aren't doing their share and helping. This is very common in families, by the way, especially in where one person is a primary stay-at-home parent. They end up kind of overdoing. So self-check with your anxiety levels, because when people feel anxious, when they feel angry, they tend to step into a mode of doing things to calm down their anxiety levels. So it's really important to self-check and ask yourself, and there's a saying, to thine own self be true. Are you a person who, when you get nervous, tends to tidy up or keep busy or distract yourself to make that anxious feeling go down? Or are you somebody who, when you get anxious, recognize that you're overwhelmed and you actually need a break? Because both of them, it doesn't matter which one you are, it's just important information to be mindful of how you handle your own stress. One of the big reasons for being able to identify your stress levels have to do with when we have clearly defined boundaries, and when people are really stressed, they tend to have more permeable boundaries, and they make decisions that they wouldn't necessarily do if they weren't feeling so stressed. Similar to when we're tired, people tend to make decisions when they're tired that aren't so good. I mean, distracted driving, tired. When people are tired and they're driving, they're, as dangerous and sometimes more dangerous than people who are under the influence of substances, because their decision making is just impaired. Most people who have little kids in their lives recognize this, that little children, when they are exhausted, are clearly a danger to themselves or others. So from the place of recognizing your own boundaries and recognizing how to protect yourself, especially from compassion fatigue, is when your boundaries are not permeable, you'll be able to know. I'm going to go back. Wait, you'll be able to know, because you'll be able to tell if you are feeling, you'll be able to tell if you're feeling like your relationships aren't in balance. And you'll also be able to recognize if you're putting everybody else first. That's a piece of putting the oxygen mask back on yourself and self-checking yourself for your boundaries. Many times helpers end up making decisions when their boundaries are more permeable that they wouldn't make if they had clearly defined boundaries. For example, you work from 9 till 5 and somebody is having a crisis and they really can only get in at 5 o'clock, but you have plans to go do something else at 5 o'clock. When compassion fatigue is setting in, people might say, fine, I'll do it, but they don't mean it. They don't want to do it. They're just leaning towards saying yes because they feel like they have to, because the needs are so great, but then they put themselves at risk. And their other relationships, especially their relationship with themselves, becomes secondary, which in this, start checking yourself. Are you not returning phone calls? Are you feeling like you have to say yes to everybody? Are you feeling like you want to say no to everybody? If yes, self-check and put yourself first. We all know how important exercise, nutrition, all those things are, but some of the tricks to making space for those things is to schedule them for yourself, just like you would schedule going to the dentist. The dentist is great. They do this every time you finish your appointment. They're like, okay, let's make an appointment in 6 months, because they know that people aren't going to make it otherwise. They'll come by 6 months and then goes by a year. They're like, well, wait, I was just there like 4 months ago. I can't be a year and a half already. But the dentists know this. That's why they have people schedule them. So you have to make the time. If you don't make the time for yourself and for self-care, you will not find the time. So some of the ways to do this are to buddy up with somebody, make yourself accountable, hold yourself accountable, and do it with a friend. Schedule your life, like your appointments. One of the ways that I try to honor my family and my marriage is by scheduling things in my life, which isn't really the most spontaneous way of doing things, but it does make things happen and holds me accountable to my family as well. And I try to do things on a daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly level that are, on a daily level, maybe go on a walk. On a weekly, maybe go on a big hike. On a monthly, maybe travel someplace to go overnight and go on a hike. Yearly, maybe travel someplace big to go on a big hike. It helps people hold themselves accountable and also sets you up for looking forward to things and for planning things for yourself that are outside your work life. Another little trick is, again, knowing how important it is to exercise, it can be really easy to fall off that habit. So one of the ways that I hold myself accountable is I can go 2 days in a row without exercising, but I can't go 3. So if I find myself 2 days in without exercising, on the third day, I have to do something. And that structure holds me accountable to it. And I like that it works. So what are the main reasons for being aware about compassion fatigue and recognizing all of the signs that it is there? Well, number one is having to do with resilience. Resilience is really the ability to overcome adverse situations and to bounce back from stress. But resilience is not an innate gift. It is based on something that we can learn, but it's a set of behaviors that we have to do to fill ourselves up so we have the ability to bounce back from stress. COVID has caused, it's an unprecedented situation in our lives. And we don't really know what the long-term fallout is going to be from a mental health perspective, but it's not looking good right now. People are stressed, they're overwhelmed, they're sad, they're lonely, they're isolated, and many people are really scared. And when people are scared, they tend to react with anger. It's a natural link, is fear and anger together. They're really best friends. And people are angry. And it is really important for us as helpers to take the time to slow ourselves down, to recognize that we have to fill up our own tank so we can go the long haul and be available to the community, be available to our families, and do all the things that we as helpers want to do. But the only way to do that is by making time to do the things we need to do, and by giving yourself, even though we can't do everything, giving yourself some grace and have confidence in the work that you're doing, even if you don't feel like you're doing it at the best level you can. Recognize that you are doing the work. Look out for your social support system. Look out for your friends. If people are struggling around you that are your friends, let them know you see them. Let people know you are hoping that they will see you too. That matches up with that accountability piece. Recognizing ways to release stress, sometimes being creative or focusing on hope can be an incredible gift to yourself, is hoping for the future and planning for it. Expressing gratitude to yourself for what you're doing and capable of doing, and to your friends and fellow workers, and recognizing what they're doing and being grateful for being part of the helping community. And focusing on the concept of being good enough. Many people focus on how they get overwhelmed because they don't feel perfect, and that can lead to feeling shut down and disengaging. But the concept of being good enough is a gift that you'll give to yourself, and it'll help release some of the pressure of being perfect. But very importantly is to take time off to recharge. Many people, especially in the helping professions, don't do this. They just keep going because the needs are so great and they often feel guilty and anxious. And that's one of the ways that they handle their own anxiety, is by just overgoing, keep going. And that is a surefire way to lead to burnout. And because you're not of any use to anybody else if you're dead. And when you don't take the time to take care of yourself, it tends to shorten lifespan significantly, when that would be a shame for all the people that we're trying to help. So that's basically the main presentation that I have for today. There are a few little tools that I use in my work with people that help me, and recognizing that my energy stays with me and their energy stays with them. That's a very helpful thing that I do between every person that comes in or out of my office, or every phone call or Zoom session I have, is a way of clearly defining the boundary in the relationship, which is what's mine is mine and what's theirs is theirs. And then when I feel really overwhelmed, giving myself the concept of 15 minutes at a time. I can do almost anything in 15 minutes at a time, even things I really don't want to do. I'm going to encourage you to think about that when you're feeling overwhelmed as well. Set a timer. Even if you don't have much time, if you want to go on a walk, set the timer for 7 minutes. Walk as fast as you can for 7 minutes. When the timer goes off, turn around and go back. They're little tiny things, but they can make a really big difference when overwhelm has entered your life. So thank you very much for being here today. I hope I've given you some information to recognize if compassion fatigue is entering your life, and some ways to recognize what burnout and overwhelm look like, so you can take care of yourselves, so you're better able to take care of the people that you're trying to help as well. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Vail.
Welcome.
Very much appreciate. I want to say thank you for lending your time to us, and thank you to Christina and Allison and the whole collaborative for prioritizing mental health and spending time really having this conversation today. I want you to mark your calendars. May 27th from 6 to 7:30 p.m. will be our next Mental Health in the Mountains speaker series. It will be with Dr. Vail, and the focus will be on families and COVID life. So today was a great piece for caregivers and compassion fatigue, and we're going to dive into some stuff that's going on in the home with families. The Truckee Tahoe Suicide Prevention Coalition would also love some photographs to use in prevention content. We live in what some people consider the most amazing location on earth, and we'd love to share some of your inspirational shots. So I'm going to put my email in the chat box, but I would love for you to just email any type of photos that you find inspirational to me at ttsuicideprevention@gmail.com. Around town throughout this month, we are going to be posting some flyers. We have Each Mind Matters Take What You Need flyers, where you just tear off a little piece that is a suggestion on how to help you recharge. We'll have them in English and Spanish, so keep your eye out for that. And then I will also have them linked. So if you'd like to print them and post them around, it's a great way for us to try to foster resilience throughout the community. They'll be linked on our blog, and I will post that to the Slack channel later on today. Coming up on May 11th, we have a Truckee proclamation with the town at 5 o'clock. So if you guys are into watching the town council meetings, stay tuned for that. We have a fundraiser coming up for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention at Alibi Ale Works in Truckee. That'll be on May 22nd. May 27th, we'll have a mental health in the mountains with Dr. Vail. And then we have a hike for hope. We're hoping that everything will be will be in person at Donner State Park. Last year was the inaugural year and it was a virtual hike. But that will be on June 13th at 9 a.m. and there will be a link for registration that will come out shortly. And then I am spending this afternoon finalizing some dates, but we will have a community mental health first aid, community youth mental health first aid, and community QPR coming up throughout the month of May and June. So those will be some great opportunities for some additional education. Information is at our link, TahoeLifeline.org/blog. You'll see all this information linked there by the end of the day. It's just a draft right now. I'm running a little bit slower just due to compassion fatigue myself, but I will have this done by the end of the day. I do have a connection to share with Dr. Vail's presentation on empathy and compassion. In mental health first aid and youth mental health first aid, there's a lot of activities to help develop those skills. And there's an exercise where we model an auditory hallucination, because for most people, you can empathize with disorders like anxiety and depression. We've all had something similar to what anxiety feels like, even if it's not a clinical level of anxiety, we know what anxiety feels like. But when it comes to something like psychosis, you know, if you've never experienced it, it's really hard to empathize with that. It's like you've never lost the mattress on the freeway. Maybe you've never even had to pick up and move a mattress. And so there's an activity where we model an auditory hallucination. And I received some feedback from someone last month that I'd like to read to you, just to encourage you to attend. Carve out 8 hours to attend a mental health first aid or a youth mental health first aid course sometime this year if you've not already had a chance to attend. So she wrote back to me and said, I've already used the training I received on Saturday. Yesterday, I saw a patient at the free clinic with an established diagnosis of schizophrenic or schizoaffective disorder, depression, GAD, and PTSD. She hadn't been seen in our clinic in 10 months, but now has nightmares and insomnia and is seeking treatment for that. She's currently having auditory hallucinations, and I was able to connect with her empathetically and establish a good rapport. One of the things I told her is that I had just attended a mental health first aid training and listened to a recording of an auditory hallucination, and I found it very scary. She told me it had been and is difficult to carry on conversations when she's experiencing that. She's not suicidal now, but was able to tell me about how she had attempted suicide 3 times since she first heard voices in 2019. I want to thank you. I've been a PA for 25 years and never comfortable with severe mental illness. Thank you to this class, I was comfortably able to care for a patient in need, give her a short-term fix for insomnia, and then refer her to a more definitive care this week to a psychiatric nurse practitioner and counselor. All free services that we offer at the free clinic. So that is what we have going on. And just wanted to again say thank you so much to Dr. Vail and to Allison and Christina, the collaborative, for letting us share hope.
Thank you, Shannon, and thank you, Dr. Vail.